It was my son's birthday. 28 glorious years of me funding his existence. And how did he celebrate? By announcing to a crowd of beer-soaked freeloaders that the best gift I could possibly give him was to vanish from his life forever. Charming, isn't it? Hallmark doesn't make a card for that one. So there I was, standing at the back door, clutching a homemade cake like some tragic bake-off reject. Candles ready to go, gift tucked under my arm, my father's vintage watch, 3 generations of family history, basically the crown jewels of sentimentality. And what does my darling boy say? Wish Dad would just disappear. Oh, splendid. Nothing says happy birthday. Quite like patricide light, served with premium beer. Through the glass, I watched Brandon, my pride and joy, the reason I got gray hair in an overdraft, knock back a bottle while his mates, Mike and Jason, cackle like hyenas. Samantha, bless her, didn't even look up from her phone, too busy scrolling through whatever dull nonsense was more interesting than human interaction, which, to be fair, is most things these days. Mike, ever philosopher, raise a toast to my alleged overbearing nature. Jason, the sage, decided my engineering background means I must plan my son's entire life on a spreadsheet. If only, lads. At least then, he might have a job. And there's Brandon agreeing, sneering, dismissing everything I've done. The mortgage, the food, the car he drives without asking. As though it's all some evil plot to ruin his fun. Because, of course, parenting is just one long conspiracy against your child's right to eternal adolescence. I almost dropped the cake, though frankly, part of me wished I had. Right on his smug trainers. Here you go, son. Chocolate spun to the side of resentment. Memories flooded in. Christmas mornings ignored. Graduation speeches mocked. Countless birthdays reducing me footing the bill for someone who clearly thinks I'm about as welcome as mold in the bathroom. And yet, somehow, I didn't storm out. No, I stood there, gripping that bloody cake like a contestant in the world's saddest talent show, trying to decide whether to cry, scream, or just shove my head straight into the buttercream. Instead, I backed away, slowly, like a burglar caught mid-heist, left the cake on the counter, abandoned the candles, ditched the gift. If my son wanted me gone so badly, perhaps, just perhaps, I'd give him the birthday wish of his dreams. Only not quite in the way he expected. Several guests glanced my way as I stepped forward. The sort of look you give a parent about to ruin fun with a turn the music down lecture. Sorry to disappoint folks, but tonight's special isn't noise complaints. No, tonight we're serving up a full-course family meltdown. Brandon. My voice sliced through their laughter. Can we talk privately? He turned with all the urgency of a man, deciding whether to snooze his alarm for the 9th time. Same expression I'd seen when I caught him using my credit card for emergency purchases. Translation, sneakers and Deliveroo. Dad, whatever you heard, it's true. Shrug, sip of beer. Not even the decency to pretend otherwise. You're interfering with my life, and everyone here knows it. Ah, lovely. Brutal honesty delivered with the confidence of someone who's never had to pay a council tax bill. How can you say that after everything I've done for you? I asked, foolishly expecting the concept of gratitude to exist. Nobody asked you to. That was your choice. Right. Feeding you, clothing you, keeping you alive. Apparently those were all elective hobbies of mine, like stamp collecting or yoga. Mike, his loyal sidekick, chimed in, Dude's got a point, Mr. Davis. Parents choose to have kids. Oh, excellent. Parenting advice from Mike, whose greatest life achievement so far is finishing a pint without spilling it on his trainers. I looked around at my kingdom, my backyard, my beer, my barbecue, and saw guests tuning in like this was Netflix Live. 28 years of sacrifice, and my son was playing a lead role in how to humiliate your father in front of strangers. Yes, Brandon said, his voice rising, audience feeding his ego. You want gratitude for stuff I never requested. That's your problem, not mine. Jason laughed. Boomer mentality, man. I sacrificed, so you owe me? Delightful. My parenting reduced to a meme. If only Freud were alive to witness this Greek tragedy. Beer bottles and all. So when you told your friends you wished I'd disappear forever, you meant it? I asked, Surprise flicker across his face. The tiniest crack. Then it was gone, replaced with that smug grin. Yeah, I meant it. You hover, you lecture, you make everything about your expectations. He waved his beer bottle, droplets flying like champagne at a football match. Maybe if you found your own life instead of controlling mine, we'd both be happier. The crowd had gathered now, a circle of voyeurs, drinks in hand, enjoying my humiliation like it was a halftime show. Samantha even looked up from her phone long enough to giggle. Brandon, you're terrible. She meant it as a compliment. Of course. Nothing sexier than a man who trashes his father in public. Right? So there I was, surrounded by people eating my food, drinking my beer, applauding my son's performance in Ungrateful Brat, the musical. 28 years of midnight feeds, endless bills, driving lessons, and a car loan I'll be paying off until the afterlife. All reduced to a punchline. I turned away, but Brandon's laughter followed me like a bad ringtone. Something inside me shifted. The hurt congealed, hardened into something sharp, something colder. He wanted me gone? Fine. That could be arranged. But not quite in the way he imagined. I climbed the stairs, each creak a soundtrack to my downfall, and shut the bedroom door behind me. Silence at last, apart from the faint roar of the party. Still going strong on my dime. The mirror didn't offer much comfort. It showed me a man I barely recognized, hollow-eyed, hunched, apparently auditioning for the role of human doormat. When had I become this? The kind of father who funds his own humiliation, who provides for a son that wishes him dead. My mind flashed back to last spring's car debacle. Brandon had dragged me to 3 dealerships, demanding I co-sign for a car he couldn't afford. When I suggested something sensible, he'd turned to the salesman with an exaggerated sigh. Sorry about my dad. He doesn't get that image matters in my field. Translation, my father's a peasant. I still signed. 15 grand later, he was cruising around in a used Honda he called mediocre. Mediocre. Honestly, if the car had feelings, it would have filed a complaint with HR. And there it was, the perfect snapshot of my life. Paying for someone else to mock me in public while pretending I should be grateful for privilege. Another memory barged into my brain, uninvited, like all the worst guests at this endless pity party of mine. Christmas dinner. I'd actually invited Brandon's friends, thinking perhaps food and wine might achieve what love, money, and common sense hadn't. Foolish optimism, the gateway drug of parenthood. I'd spent days preparing that feast, desperate to prove to his mates that I wasn't the controlling ogre Brandon had painted me as. And what did Mike say, halfway through dessert? Actually, Mr. Davis, Brandon tells us you're pretty strict about everything. The smirk barely disguised. Yes, must be terrible. I thought, having a parent who occasionally tells you not to set fire to the house. Brandon raised his glass, grinning like some Poundland Caesar. You have no idea. Dad thinks he knows what's best for everyone. His little fan club roared, fueled by wine I paid for and roast potatoes I peeled. And I... Oh, pathetic me. Kept smiling, kept pouring, kept playing the gracious host while my dignity was carved up alongside the turkey. But tonight was different. Tonight, my darling boy had finally said the quiet part loud, and something inside me snapped neatly like a Lego brick. I wandered to the window, peered down at the garden. There he was, my prodigal son, beer in hand, holding court like the messiah of mediocrity. His disciples, Mike, Jason, Samantha, all hanging on every word of his stand-up routine, performed at my expense on my property, powered by my electricity. Lovely. How many years had I financed my own disrespect? Truly, the ROI on fatherhood is dreadful. The engineer in me finally clocked in for duty. 30 years of problem solving, and now my variables were crystal clear. Brandon wanted me gone. I wanted respect. My current method, endless patience, financial generosity, praying for gratitude like some daft saint, had failed spectacularly. Time for a new experiment. I glanced in the mirror, and for once, I didn't see a victim. I didn't see a doormat. I saw a man with options, a man with resources, a man funding an entire ecosystem of ungrateful parasites. Brandon, at 28, had the survival instinct of a goldfish. No job, no savings, no skills beyond finishing a beer someone else bought. His entire world floated on my wallet. What would happen if that wallet closed? The thought was icy, deliciously sharp. Everything, the house, the fridge, the Wi-Fi, the heating for his precious gaming nights, was mine. He wanted me gone? Oh! He was about to get all the space he could choke on. I descended the stairs with the solemn weight of a man walking to the gallows, except this time, I was a hangman. Out into the garden I strode, past the chatter and smoke, and straight to the sound system. There was a wireless microphone, gleaming like destiny. I grabbed it, twisted the volume. Silence crashed over the party like the world's most awkward encore. "The party is over," I announced, voice booming across the yard. "Please leave my property." The effect was glorious. Bottles froze mid-air, mouths hung open, conversations died mid-sentence. Even the drunk ones understood. Daddy had officially lost his patience. Brandon's face flickered. Shock, embarrassment, then, inevitably, his trademark arrogance. "Nobody's going anywhere," he declared, addressing his audience like a second-rate politician. "This is my party." Mike scurried to his side. "Robert, don't ruin the kid's birthday." "Kid," I thought. "He's 28, Mike. He's one missed rent payment away from living in a tent." "This is my property," I said calmly to Mike, as though presenting quarterly profits to a boardroom. "Legally, I decide who stays and who leaves." Jason chuckled. "Come on, Mr. Davis. Don't be dramatic. We're not hurting anything." "Yes, Jason. Just quietly dismantling my dignity in front of 30 strangers. But please, do carry on." Brandon sneered. "Dad, put the microphone down. Stop embarrassing yourself. These are my friends. This is my party. You're acting like a crazy person." And that's when it hit me. The cruel irony. After 3 decades of feeding, clothing, educating, and housing him, I was the intruder in my own house, funded by my own bank account. I leaned into mic time to make sure every last guest understood. The landlord had officially checked in. "I own this house," I announced, microphone in hand, like some bitter landlord hosting an open-air eviction seminar. "I pay the mortgage, the utilities, the insurance, the taxes. This isn't your property, Brandon. It's mine." Cue my son, dismissive hand wave, smug little smirk. "So what? You've been supporting me for years. That's what parents do." "Oh, marvelous. Apparently. Fatherhood is less about love and more about being a lifelong ATM with Wi-Fi. You can't just kick people out because you're having some kind of breakdown," he sneered. Samantha giggled from her patio throne, because nothing says comedy gold quite like a man publicly severing ties with his only child. The rest of the crowd muttered nervously, but no one moved, because why leave free beer? "Actually, I can," I said, voice echoing beautifully through the speakers. "It's called trespassing. Look it up." For the first time, Brandon's swagger faltered. His mates, suddenly less confident, glanced around like meerkats in a thunderstorm. Mike tried a weak protest. "You wouldn't call the cops on your own son's birthday." "Watch me," I said, setting the mic down with all the finality of a judge banging a gavel. "You've got 5 minutes." That's when panic cracked through Brandon's bravado. "Dad, you can't do this. These are my friends." Oh, the irony. The same friends who'd spent all evening treating me like a clown in my own circus. I turned at the back door. "You wanted me gone from your life? This is how it works. When I go, the house goes with me." Click. Door shut. Curtain down. Through the kitchen window, I saw them murmuring, shifting uneasily. Some guests edged toward the gate. Others stayed, clinging to denial as if the party might somehow resurrect itself. 25 minutes later, salvation arrived in red and blue. Patrol cars sweeping into the drive, lights washing over the garden like a divine spotlight. The atmosphere evaporated faster than free booze as student union. Officer James Miller stepped in first, the very picture of calm authority. His partner, Officer Lindegark, followed, radiating the kind of quiet menace only women with clipboards and legal backing possess. Who called the police? Miller asked. That would be me, I said, stepping forward like the star witness at a trial. This is my property. I asked them to leave. They refused. Nods. Notes scribbled. Documents checked. At last, my boring obsession with proper paperwork had its day in the sun. 28 years of home ownership, and tonight it finally paid off. Gark raised her voice with professional clarity. Everyone present must leave this private property immediately. Continued presence constitutes trespassing. You could have heard a pin drop. Then chaos. Some guests bolted, grabbing coats and car keys with the urgency of people suddenly remembering they had work in the morning. Others lingered, eyes darting to Brandon, as though his approval meant more than police badges. This isn't fair. Samantha whined, clutching her drink like it was Exhibit A in her defense. Ma'am, Officer Gark said patiently, adult children living in their parent homes do not have the legal right to authorize guests. Translation, your boyfriend is a freeloader, and no amount of eyeliner changes property law. Brandon tried one last stand. This is ridiculous. It's my birthday. My father's just being vindictive. Miller didn't even blink. Family disputes don't change property law. Your father owns this property. His word stands. I almost applauded. Years of lectures. Ignored. One sentence from a policeman. Gospel truth. Slowly, the garden thinned. Sensible guests vanished into the night. Brandon's loyal trio, Mike, Jason, Samantha, clung to him like loyal bodyguards. Their commitment to bad decisions truly admirable. How long do they have to leave? I asked, my voice deliberately calm, as though I hadn't fantasized about this moment for years. We typically allow a reasonable amount of time, Miller replied. But after that, it becomes a more serious matter. Perfect. Serious matter. 2 words guaranteed to terrify beer-soaked 20-somethings. Brandon's face finally cracked. That confidence, the endless supply of mockery and entitlement, drained just enough to show what lay beneath. Fear. Dad, you can't actually have us arrested for having a party, he said, but his voice wobbled. And oh, what a beautiful sound that was. I wasn't having anyone arrested. Not really. I was just exercising my legal rights as a property owner, which is a polite way of saying I'd finally snapped. What happened next? Entirely up to whether people respected those rights or fancied testing out the local jail's hospitality. Officer Gark checked her watch with the weary air of someone who'd broken up far too many family soap operas on patios. 5 minutes, she announced. Leave now or it's trespassing. That cleared another layer of party parasites. Suddenly, loyalty to Brandon wasn't worth a criminal record. Can't imagine why. Within minutes, my garden soiree of 20 had whittled down to a stubborn little cult of 6. Brandon, bless him, decided this was a hill he'd die on. Crossed arms, jaw set, feet planted. I live here. This is my home, too. Oh, here we go. The sovereign citizen of the upstairs bedroom. Officer Miller, who looked about one side away from retirement, stepped closer, hand hovering over his handcuffs. Young man, you are breaking the law. Last chance. And what did my son say? I'm not going anywhere. This is ridiculous. You can't arrest someone for being at their own house. Actually, they can. And fun fact, they were about to. Officer Gark flanked him, smooth as a cat. You don't own this property. The legal owner has told you to leave. Brandon's eyes darted, from the cops, to me, to his rapidly thinning support group. Suddenly, he looked less like a leader, and more like a contestant on a game show who just realized the grand prize was handcuffs. Dad, tell them this is crazy. I live here. You live here by my permission, I replied, calm as you like. Permission I'm withdrawing. Honestly, it felt like canceling a dodgy subscription. Miller stepped forward, handcuffs gleaming. Turn around and place your hands behind your back. And there it was, the crack in the facade. Are you serious right now? You're actually going to arrest me? His voice broke, high-pitched panic seeping through the arrogance. Yes, serious, very. The moment stretched, and then, click, handcuffs locked, echoing through the empty patio like the world's most satisfying punctuation mark. Brandon Davis, "You're under arrest for criminal trespassing and failure to comply with lawful order," Miller droned, as if he'd said 1,000 times. Probably people with more sense than my son. Samantha gasped, clutching her drink like it might testify on her behalf. "This can't be happening. Robert, you can't let them arrest your son." "I'm not letting them," I said. I specifically invited them to. As they marched into patrol car, Brandon twisted, eyes full of venom. "Dad, I'll never forgive you. You've made the biggest mistake of your life." "Ah, yes, the classic move. Threaten eternal hatred while in handcuffs. Very effective." "Well, we'll see," I replied, not uncheerfully. Door closed, engine started. Off he went, chauffeured by the county's finest to his first ever taste of consequences. Mike, suddenly very mortal without his ringleader, piped up, "Officer, how long will he be held?" "That depends on charges and the judge," Gark answered. "Criminal trespass can carry up to 2 weeks in county jail." 2 weeks. 14 glorious, Brandon-free days. Long enough to clean, reset, and maybe even remember what silence sounds like. As the patrol car disappeared down the street, Samantha sniffled. Mike and Jason picked up bottles with all the enthusiasm of men cleaning their own gallows, and I stood tall on my patio. The party was dead. The backyard was mine again. Paper plates, empty cups, a cooling barbecue. Sure, I'd have to scrub the place tomorrow. But tonight was victory. And tomorrow would be the first morning in years where the house actually felt like mine. Coffee brewed without complaints from upstairs. Silence. Sweet, glorious silence. A quick call to the clerk confirmed it. 2 full weeks. 2 weeks to put my plan into action. 2 weeks to breathe. 2 weeks to taste freedom before Brandon returned. Hopefully marginally wiser, though I wasn't holding my breath. The following days were spent with the same methodical precision that once made me a respected engineer, except this time, instead of designing bridges, I was dismantling my son's entire fantasy life. Poetic, really. Step 1. The numbers. 5 years of financial records, rent equivalents, utilities, food, insurance, the works. By the time I finished, I had calculated that supporting Brandon's unemployment had cost me roughly $50,000 a year. 50 grand. Enough to buy a small car, fund a holiday, or, I don't know, live without the privilege of bankrolling a 28-year-old man-child who thinks work is spelt with 4 letters. DAD. Then there were the parties, gas money, emergencies, translation, hangovers, and broken Xbox controllers. Honestly, I should have sent myself an invoice. And while I was at it, I checked the housing market. Similar homes were selling between $820,000 and $880,000. Mine? Immaculate, well-maintained, modernized, easily top range. Lovely little irony, isn't it? Brandon's dream palace of eternal freeloading was actually a prime slice of Californian real estate, just waiting to be cashed in. Of course, memories surfaced while I planned, like the job fair fiasco last November. I'd chauffeured him to 3 interviews, prepped him like he was about to negotiate peace in the Middle East. And what did he do? Strolled in late, dressed like a hungover substitute teacher, and answered questions as though sarcasm was career path. When confronted, he said, and I quote, "Why would I work minimum wage when you give me everything I need?" At the time, I nodded like a fool. In hindsight, it was a moment the universe should have slapped me in the face with a frying pan. By the end of his first week in jail, I had clarity. Brandon wanted me gone. He'd announced it repeatedly, with the smug cruelty of a man who'd never seen a bill in his life. Very well. I would disappear, not as the beaten-down father he expected, but as a man who sold the ground out from under his ungrateful feet. Week 2, research. Retirement communities in Arizona, Colorado, North Carolina. Anywhere cheap, sunny, and delightfully free of Brandon. Somewhere he couldn't just roll up demanding money because he'd accidentally ordered 3 kegs on my credit card. The solution was pure engineering. Remove the failing variable from the system. In this case, the variable was my ongoing financial support of son, who openly wished me dead between gulps of lager. As his release date crept closer, my decision hardened. A real estate agent's card sat beside my morning coffee, like a loaded weapon. Michelle Johnson, glowing online reviews, specializes in quick sales. Perfect. Her office was every cliche of success. Framed certificates, smug photos of smiling homeowners, and the faint whiff of money well earned. She greeted me with professional calm. "So, Mr. Davis, what's the urgency?" I slid my meticulously organized documents across her polished desk. Family circumstances. Immediate action required. Translation. My son's about to be paroled from freeloading, and I need the locks changed before he figures it out. She dove into her market analysis, charts and comps flashing like a surgeon prepping for delicate brain surgery. 40 minutes later, she delivered the verdict. List at $850,000. With proper staging, it'll move in a week. Perfect. Exactly the deadline I needed. I'll agree to that, I said smoothly, leaning forward. And there's a significant bonus if you close in 7 days. Her eyes lit up like I just handed her a golden retriever wrapped in $100 bills. Professionals love efficiency. And bribes. The stage was set. My house, my prison, my battlefield, my monument to bad parenting was about to become someone else's mortgage. And Brandon? He was about to discover what disappearing really looks like. Spoiler. It involves estate agents and zero regrets. How significant are we talking? Michelle asked, try not to sound too interested. Oh, just a casual $5,000 above your standard commission if you get it signed by next Tuesday. Her professional mask slipped for half a second. Mr. Davis, you have my complete attention. Translation. You just became my favorite old man in Silicon Valley. She suggested we head straight to my house for an evaluation. 20 minutes later, I was driving through the same neighborhood I trudged for 3 decades, now viewing it like a tourist about to flee the country. Michelle followed in her car, her camera gear glaring at me through the rear window like paparazzi waiting to ruin someone's career. Walking through my own home while she judged it for resale was surreal. Every room whispered memories. Birthday parties, homework at the kitchen table. Brandon once throwing a tantrum because the Wi-Fi was too slow. The slow decline from grateful child to adult squatter. Maintenance is exceptional, Michelle said, snapping photos of my shiny kitchen and polished floors. Thank you, I nearly replied. It's easy when you don't spend money on your son's rent. She mentioned staging. I told her to do whatever she liked. At this point, I'd have hired Cirque du Soleil to juggle in the front garden if it got the house sold faster. By the end, her verdict matched my research. Perfect condition, perfect timing, perfect chance of a bidding war. Ah, yes, a bidding war. Strangers would soon pay obscene amounts of money for the privilege of occupying the very same house my son couldn't even bother to mow the lawn for. Back at her office, we signed contracts faster than you could say, good riddance. She laid out the schedule with military precision. Professional photos tomorrow, listing live Thursday, open house Saturday and Sunday. Brandon's release was exactly a week away. My timing? Impeccable. His welcome home party would consist of a for sale sign and locked doors. Are you relocating, Mr. Davis? This seems dramatic. Sometimes circumstances demand it, I said, deadpan. What I wanted to say was, yes, Michelle, I'm dramatically relocating from unpaid parent/landlord to free man. She nodded in that professional way that meant, not my circus, not my monkeys, but do sign here, please. As I left her office, contract in hand, I felt the rare joy of man turning years of quiet suffering into one glorious act of petty vengeance. The house that sheltered Brandon's entitlement for 28 years was about to become someone else's mortgage. Someone who would imagine this actually pay for it. There was one last step, timing Brandon's release. So the next morning I drove to Santa Clara County Jail. Half an hour through traffic. Plenty of time to rehearse, not laughing when I saw the place. The building loomed from the industrial landscape like a gray Lego set designed by Satan. Beautiful. Inside, I was processed like I was the inmate. ID check, metal detectors, registration forms. Bureaucracy so efficient, it almost made me nostalgic for corporate engineering. At the desk sat Sergeant Davis. No relation, though he did share the same aura of weary disappointment I perfected as a parent. Inmate name? Brandon Davis. Criminal trespassing. 2 weeks. Click-clack went the keyboard. My son, reduce the numbers on a screen, a cell assignment, and a release schedule. Honestly, the database treated him with more efficiency than I ever managed. Booked April 15th. Release April 29th, 9 a.m. Perfect. Like clockwork. The universe, for once, was on my side. Anything else I should know? I asked. Standard procedure. He'll be processed out here. Effects returned. Voucher for transport if requested. And then came the question. Delivered with absolute neutrality. Like he was asking about the weather. Would you like to visit with him while you're here? The words just hung there. Thick as smoke. Visit Brandon. Have one last heart-to-heart in a room with plastic chairs and bad fluorescent lighting. Did I want to? Oh, absolutely not. But that's a story for another scene. There it was. My big chance to see Brandon, to sit across from him in some grim visiting room, perhaps share a touching father-son moment about life, love, and consequences. Naturally, I said, no, that won't be necessary. For words, clean as a guillotine blade, and just as effective at ending whatever faint scrap of parental obligation still lingered. Sergeant Davis, no relation, though I'd have happily traded mine for him, didn't blink. Family drama wasn't in his job description. He just droned on about visiting hours, in case I fancied a late change of heart. As if I walked back out to the checkpoints, stripped of dignity, personal choice, and any lingering belief that Brandon might one day grow up. 10 days inside the system had reduced him to a number, a timetable, and, hopefully, a minor lesson in not treating your father like an ATM with a spare room attached. Driving home, I savored the symmetry. Release at 9 a.m., April 29th. By 9:05, Brandon would be enthusiastically reenacting his favorite childhood pastime, throwing a tantrum. Except this time, instead of screaming for ice cream, he'd be discovering that his house, his precious kingdom of entitlement, now belonged to complete strangers. Michelle, of course. Time recalled perfectly, as I was literally stepping into my front door for what would be the last time as its owner. Robert Davis, she trilled. Wonderful news. Full cash offer, no contingencies. Closing tomorrow morning at 9:30. Honestly, the universe was starting to feel like it was on my payroll. Brandon out at 9. House gone at 9:30. Precision worthy of a Swiss watch, or at the very least, a very bitter engineer with too much time on his hands. The Garcias arrived like a Hallmark advert come to life. 2 adorable kids racing through what used to be Brandon's stomping ground, while Carlos and Maria beamed with the joy of people who had earned their home. It was nauseatingly wholesome. I loved it. Thank you for accepting so quickly, Maria said. Life circumstances change so fast. Oh, you've no idea, Maria. I handed them the keys, the garage opener, and the piece de resistance, an envelope addressed to Brandon. Inside, 40 words sharp enough to double as a scalpel. Brandon, you said you wanted me to disappear. Consider your wish granted. The house is sold. I am traveling indefinitely. Independence achieved. Robert, short, devastating, emotionally bulletproof. No forwarding address, no contact details, no chance for him to twist the knife back. Just a mic drop on paper. After the Garcias settled in, I strolled next door to Frank Collins' house with nothing but a suitcase and the casual confidence of a man about to watch his son implode in real time. Can I stay with you for a few days, Frank? I'm between living situations. Frank, bless him, barely hesitated. Of course, old friend. What happened with the house? Oh, Frank, if only you knew. I sold it. Time for major changes. Frank gave me the kind of concerned look neighbors give when you casually mention you've burnt down your own life on a Tuesday. To his credit, he didn't pry. That's Frank for you. The perfect mix of supportive and nosy but knows better. What about Brandon, he asked, as if my son was a lost cat instead of a 28-year-old professional sponge. Brandon is an adult. He'll figure it out. My tone made it abundantly clear that adult was being used in the loosest possible sense, like adult child or adult tantrum. Frank, wise man, didn't press further. His guest room had everything I needed: a clean bed, fresh towels, and most importantly, a sniper's view of my old front door. That window was now my private theater box for tomorrow's grand performance. Brandon meets reality. I spent the night watching the Garcias unpack their lives into mine. Maria fluffing pillows, Carlos carrying boxes, their kids zooming around like caffeinated squirrels. Every moment was pure poetry. Tomorrow, Brandon would swagger up that same driveway with the confidence of a king returning from exile. Only this time, his castle had new owners and better curtains. By morning, I was practically vibrating with anticipation. 9:30. Showtime. From Frank's upstairs perch, I watched Brandon stroll down the street like he was auditioning for Lord of the Manor. Same old clothes from jail, a plastic bag of personal effects, and, shockingly, the exact same posture of entitlement he'd had before spending 2 weeks eating bologna sandwiches behind bars. Growth, zero. He marched up the drive, jingling keys that were now about as useful as Monopoly money. When the lock didn't turn, he froze, blinking at the door like it had personally betrayed him. The irony was exquisite. A man trying to open a door to a life he'd long since locked himself out of. Meanwhile, the Garcia kids were playing football in his front yard, shrieking with the kind of joy Brandon hadn't contributed to this house in decades. Carlos lifted a box, looked up, and caught the full blast of my son's indignation. "Excuse me," Brandon barked, channeling his inner lord of the peasants. "Who are you people? And what are you doing in my house?" Carlos blinked, politely confused. "Sorry, friend. This is our house. We bought it last week." The sound Brandon made could only be described as entitled whale song. "That's impossible. I live here. This is my family's home." Maria stepped in, efficient, calm, muddily. "Honestly, I could have hugged her. Are you Brandon Davis?" "Yes." Finally, someone sensible. "Please explain to these people why they're squatting in my home." Bless her heart, Maria didn't even laugh. She just handed him the envelope. My envelope. 40 words of cold steel wrapped in polite stationery. Watching him tear it open was like watching someone realize their parachute was actually a backpack full of bricks. "Brandon, you said you wanted me to disappear. Consider your wish granted. The house is sold. I'm traveling indefinitely. Enjoy your independence. Robert." And there it was. Confusion. Disbelief. Panic. The full tragicomedy mask rotation. If Shakespeare had written Entitled Son, the musical, this would have been the opening number. "This can't be real," he stammered, voice cracking under the weight of his own bad decisions. He can't just sell the house and disappear. That's not how families work. Carlos, bless his patience, actually apologized. "Sir, I'm sorry for your situation, but we've got the paperwork. The sale was final yesterday." I leaned on Frank's windowsill, savoring every frame of the disaster like it was a fine wine. 28 years of disrespect had finally distilled into this single, glorious truth. My son had no house, no plan, absolutely no idea what to do next. And me? I'd never felt lighter. Brandon's legs gave out like a dodgy IKEA chair, and he clung to the mailbox, which, for the record, no longer belonged to him. His pathetic plastic jail bag spilled across the pavement like the world's worst yard sale. One toothbrush, one crushed packet of crisps, and a future worth less than both. "Where am I supposed to live? How am I supposed to eat?" he whispered, not demanded. Oh, progress. At 28, he'd finally discovered the question most people figure out at, 18? Maria and Carlos exchanged looks. That polite, "oh dear, the neighbors are feral" kind of look. Clearly wishing they bought literally any other house. And there I was hidden upstairs like some petty Shakespearean villain, basking in the perfect symmetry of revenge, while also annoyingly feeling a tiny speck of paternal guilt. Because yes, the justice was flawless, but watching your son crumble into a puddle of tears on the curb does stir something. Like pity, or heartburn. He read the note, then reread it, as if the words might magically rearrange into, "Just kidding, son. Here's a pony and a trust fund." Spoiler, they did not. Behind him, the Garcias bustled about, happy to have an actual home. Brandon, meanwhile, was discovering the exotic flavor of consequences. 40 words. 28 years of freeloading. Equation solved. Eventually, he folded the note, tucked it away like some tragic relic, and shuffled off down the street. Hours passed before I peeled myself away from Frank's window. The image of Brandon's tears, not manipulative crocodile nonsense, but actual, ugly, soul-cracking sobs, burned itself into my brain like an emotional screensaver I hadn't asked for. Well, congratulations, son. You finally produced a genuine emotion, and of course, it had to arrive precisely when it was utterly useless. Timing really is everything. Later, Frank found me staring into a cup of stone-cold coffee, looking like I had just been ghosted by life itself. Rough day watching the neighborhood drama? He asked. Something like that. I muttered, which, if translated, meant, yes, Frank, I detonated my family and am now squatting in your guest room like a middle-aged spy. He offered sympathy about Brandon losing his home. I corrected him silently. It was never Brandon's home. It was mine. He just mistook free rent for divine right. Sometimes consequences take years to arrive, I said, but they always do. Frank nodded, wise old sage of suburbia. Next morning, California sunshine, new beginnings, and the sweet smell of not my problem anymore. I packed my single suitcase, lightest load I'd carried in decades, and drove off with $850,000 in the bank, zero dependents, and a brand new career in not giving a damn. Frank waved from his porch. 30 years of neighborly respect condensed into one awkward salute. I waved back, genuinely grateful. He'd unknowingly hosted the final act of my little family tragedy, complete with box seats and commentary. The Pacific stretched ahead, shimmering like some cliché postcard promising reinvention. I'd spent 28 years bankrolling a son who begged me to vanish. Fine. Wish granted. Disappearing act complete. Tada. And yet, those tears. Damn him. In that final moment, I saw the son I'd wondered existed. The real one, hidden beneath all the arrogance and entitlement. Still my son, unfortunately. Still human. Still capable of breaking my heart, even as I walked away. But here's the thing. Decisions don't need to feel good to be right. Respect isn't reclaimed with speeches. It's rebuilt with boundaries. Mine was a sold house, a sealed envelope, and a full tank of petrol. So I drove west toward the ocean and the unknown, lighter than I'd ever been. Brandon was left with reality for company. I had horizons to chase. And for once, for the first time in 28 bloody years, no one was asking me for anything. And that's how I disappeared. 850,000 pounds richer, lighter than ever, and finally free from a 28-year unpaid parenting internship. Brandon got what he wanted, a father who vanished. I got what I wanted, silence, sunshine, and a life that's actually mine. So if you enjoyed this gloriously messy tale of consequences, hit like, subscribe, and share your thoughts below. Because sometimes the best revenge is just moving on.